Let's do this.
Welcome to Our Drummers Musicians, your backstage pass to Melbourne's vibrant music scene. Recorded on a cosy couch in Brunswick, join us as we explore what it truly means to be a musician and speak to the diverse talents that make music in our city. Today we're thrilled to welcome Caitlin Thomas to our podcast. Caitlin is a drummer, band leader and musical educator based in Melbourne's southeast. She has toured nationally with production companies Skinnyfish Productions and Pop-Up Globe, and internationally with Australian International Productions. Caitlin has gigged around Melbourne, performing her original music with bands, as well as playing drums for other local artists. She's completed a Bachelor of Music, majoring in jazz performance at Monash University, graduating in 2018. Caitlin has also been teaching drum students of all levels for over 10 years. Join us as we explore Caitlin's musical journey, delve into her experience on stage and in the classroom, and discuss her starting a maths degree to assist with lyrical accuracy for a musical she was composing. We want to take a moment to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land in which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hey Caitlin, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Luke. How do you do?
Good, thank you. Sorry about Scout climbing all over the microphones and counters.
Not at all.
What is the most recent album that you've listened to?
I've been listening a lot to Jon Bellion, The Human Condition, and it's a pretty old album, but it's one that I always come back to because I think his lyricism is really, really powerful, and I think the production on the album is great as well. So strong recommend if you haven't listened.
Would that album sit like in your top 10 albums of all time?
Top 5, I would say.
Wow.
Yeah.
What else is in the list?
I can't shake the fact that I grew up listening to a lot of Green Day, and I would probably say that their 1994 album Dookie is up there just for the memories. I think off the top of my head, probably like the jazz album would be Avishai Cohen's Seven Seas. That had a pretty profound influence on me when I was studying music.
Mm-hmm.
The last top 2, I don't know. I don't think we have enough time on the podcast for me to really, really think deeply about what I'd be happy to say for those last 2. So those would be the top 3 off the top of my head.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
No worries.
It's I should clarify that in the introduction I said maths degree, but it's actually a science and a separate computer science degree.
Yes.
But it was done, if I remember correctly, because you're writing a musical and you said, I need to know the maths better so that I can better write the musical. Is that true?
Yeah, pretty close to verbatim, I think, as well.
So where did this need for lyrical accuracy and like deep dive commitment to your projects come from?
Particularly for that one or just in general?
No, either. Or both.
I think that I have always liked any kind of artistic expression that has depth. It's one of the reasons I really like Jon Bellion, actually. And I think in order to really, and just my opinion, obviously, but I think to me, music speaks or any kind of art speaks the most to its depth when the heart of the person behind that artistic venture is kind of all in, like I think part of art is going all into something, whatever that something is. And I think it's very clear when an artist has done that versus perhaps when they haven't. And that was something that at the time I felt was necessary to go all in for this particular venture. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Listen to Jon Bellion. Great lyricism.
I remember doing a cover of his with the uni band, but I can't remember what song it was. But like it had like a dun 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 dun. It was the like vibe.
Oh, do you know how I got onto Jon Bellion actually? It was because a student at Silverton, where you used to work, actually introduced him to me because they wanted to learn how to play one of his songs.
Oh, that's cool.
And I'm pretty sure it was that exact song that you were just singing, which, if I'm not mistaken, was All Time Low, which was like a big
that's
popular,
it. That's
popular
what it's
hit.
called. Yes.
Right. Oh, wow. How funny is that? Well, thanks for introducing me through proxy to John Bellion.
You're welcome. Well, so if we go back to like the very start of music for you, you mentioned Green Day.
Yep.
Did you start by playing an instrument, or was it the listening experience for you that first got you in?
The listening experience allowed me to really jump in with 2 feet into pursuing an instrument. My first instrument was guitar, and Green Day was great because they were easy. Like the music was very, very accessible to someone that had never played music before. Just kind of 4-chord tunes. But that to me at the time they were an example of one of those bands that, yes, they were perhaps quite simple musically, but they had that sense of going all in that I was speaking about before, and there was an honesty to their music that may not necessarily have always been overly sophisticated, but I don't think you need to be sophisticated to get to what I think it is to be musically or creatively or artistically all in and honest. And they very much represented a lot of that energy to me at the time.
So who introduced you to Green Day? Like, was it on the radio, or someone at home like had a CD?
I think it was no doubt probably on the radio a lot when I was that age, but I didn't really listen to the radio. This was like 2004 and they just released their American Idiot album. But it was my parents that really listened to a lot of Green Day. My dad played in a couple of bands that would play some of their older hits like Basket Case and Longview and whatnot. And my mum had an old CD lying around that I just listened to, and I read the liner notes for, and I was really like deep diving into all their lyrics, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. Because I was 10 and they talked about drugs, and I was like, wow, that's so radical.
So where did the music taste like develop from there?
So from there I went and I got more interested in what music could represent. And I started exploring punk music. I say punk music, but I think punks from, 20, 30 years ago would probably, or maybe 40, 50 years ago now, would probably roll their eyes at associating Green Day with that term. But nonetheless, I started listening to what I suppose you'd call pop punk bands, so Green Day and Blink-182 and all of those kind of guys, as well as a little bit more hardcore bands like Rise Against. But around the time as well, I developed musically because I was playing in a lot of bands in my youth, like garage band type things, and would put on or would attend gigs where everyone was playing. And I'd always notice that if the drummer of those acts was tight, that really did quite a bit for the rest of the band. And I remember being, maybe 14, 15 and going, wow, like the drummer really has quite a lot of control over the dynamics here. And there was one band in particular, shout out to Payroll from Newcastle, whose drummer, Tristan Lacey, who is a friend of mine from a long time ago, he was a very, very talented drummer and he had a lot of taste in the way that he would play. And I was really, really impressed. And he got me listening a lot more to Blink-182 and the drummer Travis Barker there. And through that, I became aware that Travis Barker had quite a lot of jazz experience. And I didn't know anything about jazz at the time, but knowing that A, the drummer in all of the bands that I was listening to really had a lot of influence over the overall musical project, and B, that a lot of the best drummers seem to have this kind of jazz exposure, be it, and again, I'm kind of more speaking strictly in this kind of punk or alternative scene, like Danny Carey from Tool was another example. It struck me as important to have a sense of jazz exposure to be a good drummer.
Yeah, right.
And so from there, I kind of set my ambitions on studying jazz. And very long story short, moved to Melbourne as a result of that and tried my luck in the tertiary world of jazz education in Australia.
And how do you feel about the tertiary jazz education system in Australia now, having, aspired to go through it, achieved a place in a, highly sought after course, and then completed that and, moved on to actually playing music rather than being part of that school system?
I don't know exactly what you mean by that question, but I'll answer what I think you might mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the experience studying at Monash was invaluable. I thought it was so rewarding, not only academically and technically, but also for me at least, like the emotional navigation that was required as a result of learning in that environment, which at times I think could be quite tough. And that's probably more a testament to my lack of technical ability going into that institution and meeting all of these people that had grown up in Melbourne, had studied at, what's it called? VCA?
Oh, VCAS.
VCAS, beg your pardon, yeah. Who had studied there and had these pre-existing relationships and incredible technical chops. And for me, someone who grew up listening to punk music, going like, whoa, gosh, like people here are so good and it's nothing like I've ever experienced before, and feeling quite inadequate as a result of that and trying to navigate that and being like, yeah, well, you're here to learn, like this is what you wanted, right? It was a really, really, really good lesson in so many things. So to answer your question, what do I think about the tertiary jazz paradigm? I think it's great. I think it was great when I went through, at the very least. I've been out for a number of years now, but it was really meaningful. And I made a lot of great connections as a result of that. I was like, all of the opportunities to play music professionally have been as a result of that. And I'm very, very grateful for those opportunities. And yeah, like people that I'm playing with today, I've met through that sort of scene. So it's, yeah, great. That's what I think. I think it's great.
That's awesome. You don't have to go into this if you don't want, but I'd be interested if you're happy to share a bit more about, like some of the struggles that you had going through there, because I think there's a lot of people in a similar situation to you that have a like a non-classical or non-jazz musical learning experience and listening experience that similarly want to go across into like an institution to learn through like a program like that, but mightn't have had like the confidence that you did, or at least gun-ho passion to dive in and be able to face the challenge of not knowing or not being the person who has all of the chops or something from the get-go, but actually like persisting with it and getting through.
Yeah. So talking to some of those struggles, basically I think that it's exactly as you said. That environment had a very, very steep learning curve, and quite uniquely as well to other environments that have steep learning curves is that you're performing, essentially. You're literally performing to an audience of people more often than not who are far better than you, and that's quite intimidating. But also very empowering if you can get through it. Like if there is anyone that is listening who is considering going into any kind of environment where their self-perception is that they're not up to the standard of everyone else, it's like, sure, that might be the case, but then the positive is that you're getting so much more out of it than anyone else is. Like, and isn't that something to be incredibly grateful for? There is an enormous amount of self-respect and power that you gain from entering into any situation that you don't feel prepared for and backing yourself and getting out the other side. Yeah. I think, I don't know, Luke. If you've got like particular questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I think that that's all I can really say is that old adage about anything worth doing is probably going to be hard. It's like, yeah, it is. All the more reason to do it, I guess.
Well, I think it's just like, I don't know, super inspiring, your like ability to go into a situation that's really difficult, but then like really lean into it. I think so much of like if I think about like students that I was teaching that wanted to get into like a university course, had like really hard times like accepting the struggle or the inadequacies of like, oh, I'm not very good at this, I'm going to have to work hard. Whereas you seem to, I don't know, like thrive off that. Like,
I think I've just had a lot of practice of not being very good at things.
But I guess like what I'm trying to say is that like it hasn't stopped you from doing it. There's so many people that wouldn't do it. They would go, oh no, like I would like to do that, but like I don't have the skills of the other people in my class, so I'm going to stop and change. Whereas you've like gone, I want to study at the jazz school. Oh wow, these other people have like all these skills that I don't have. Okay, great. I'm going to learn what they are. Teach me what it is, and help me grow. And I think that's super cool.
Oh, thank you. I think, I attribute a lot of that to the lessons that my dad taught me when I was growing up. He had this great phrase, which was always be good, get good, or give up. And I don't know, I just always thought about that. And I called him a lot during that time because he had his own, struggles that he'd been through for his career pursuits, and especially with, for lack of a better word, anxiety around certain performances and whatnot. He was a fighter pilot initially, and pilot selection course is very, very different industry, obviously, but it's quite demanding. And he taught me a lot, or spoke to me a bit about, some of the emotional struggles he had during that time. And it was nice to relate to that. And it was nice to relate to someone who'd done something hard and gotten out the other side, and then basically, espouse the mantra of, well, you can either be good, get good, or give up. It's like, yeah, those are your options. Which one do you want? I knew what I wanted at that stage, so it was pretty easy. But thanks for saying it's inspiring. That's nice.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't mean to be saying it like, I didn't go to VCAS, but I at least had played in big bands at school.
Yeah,
and I found coming to uni really hard because it's like, I've never actually practiced before coming here.
Yeah.
I've just learnt songs or learnt fills or something, not actually like sat in a room and practiced.
Yeah.
So I felt, really out of my depth. But listening to your version is like, oh, well, at least I played some of the styles of music. I didn't just, listen to punk music and come in like fully fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But thanks for sharing.
Oh, thanks for asking.
Well, I wanted to talk about like, some of your band leading stuff.
Yeah, cool.
Because, you're talking about like how like lyrics are really important, and at uni you had different bands, and post uni you've had different bands. And you've done like the session drummer thing of like playing with some of these like production companies, traveling around, but it's quite different to writing your own music and then actually like being able to communicate to other musicians about how to play the songs that you're writing or the compositions, and take this wherever you want. But I just love to know a bit more about like your process and why you choose to like write your own music and run a band with it too.
I think that ultimately going back to when I was initially interested in music and art, it was that observation I had when I was a kid that was, it's the drummer that makes quite a bit of a difference. And, I don't necessarily think that, and I never thought that meant that the other musicians were not significant. Of course they are. It's about the entire ensemble. But the observation when I was younger playing in original punk bands, I'd be essentially doing a less sophisticated version of what I'm doing now, which is playing in bands and trying to lead them and book gigs and yada, yada, yada. But then realising, the drummer is a significant component of this. I then pursued drumming, not in and of itself as much as I like drumming, but very much as a tool to understand how to get the most out of what I wanted musically. And that's reaped a lot of benefits, because now in contexts where I'm band leading rather than drumming, I've got at least a shared experience with the drummer that I can, and I hope the drummers that I work with would agree, maybe they don't, but I'm usually pretty capable of communicating what I want to achieve because of that experience.
I guess I should clarify that I've introduced you as a drummer, but there is much more to you going on. You're also a composer, and you sing and you play other instruments. And in this context, you're not actually playing the drums in some of these bands that you're running.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. No. I'm still playing drums in a couple of projects, but the ones that I feel most passionately about are the ones that I'm writing my own music for, or collaborating a lot of the time with other musicians on that music. But yeah, I'm writing the lyrics for all of those, and I've just always enjoyed lyricism and poetry and expression in that capacity. Storytelling, I suppose, I've always really, really liked.
Did you find that you weren't able to do that, like the storytelling aspect from the drums, because you wanted to be able to say the lyrics and you didn't want to, I guess, play drums at the same time as singing?
I think that in studying jazz, grew to appreciate that storytelling could look very different behind a drum kit, but you could still tell a story. And it took me quite a couple of years to really understand what it meant when esoteric sayings like that were thrown into the ether. But I think I do appreciate it now. But I think I just much prefer the more, the use of lyricism, especially. I like language. I like communicating with language. I like what you can do with language. And that's where I get kicks the most, I think.
And you didn't feel the need to do the Phil Collins or a more modern reference of Anderson .Paak and actually sing your songs or other pieces whilst playing the drums? No,
because I felt that you automatically have a barrier between you and the audience when you do that. Anderson .Paak would probably disagree with me, and I welcome his argumentative essay email response to when he inevitably listens to this podcast. So well, I've got a thing to tell you about that. But I think in my perspective, when I had tried a couple of times to play drums and sing, it wasn't, to be honest, that it was technically that much more demanding, but you couldn't communicate the same level of energy from behind a kit that you can on stage. There's a lot of energy that your body can communicate when you're not trapped behind an instrument, and that's something that I wanted to explore. And there was a band that I was playing with that I was drumming for, and the singer of that band was an incredible example of just how how much you can do when it's just you on stage. And I learnt a lot from that. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to explore not being behind a drum kit, but still knowing enough about the drum kit to make something.
Yeah, astute listeners of the podcast will recall we had a similar chat with Amber Ferraro.
Yeah.
Because she'd gone from singing to also doing some DJ work more recently.
Yeah.
And, had the inverse experience, I suppose, of having the really close physical connection to an audience whilst performing.
Yeah.
And then finding herself behind DJ decks.
Yeah.
Which was a bit like a drum kit, I suppose.
Yeah, truly.
In the same, physical distancing. So it's cool that you've, found that and then been able to, still make great music, but move into a different chapter where it's not you playing, but making great music still.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
How do you go about choosing, who the different musicians are that you collaborate with?
Whoever is tolerant enough of my personality to be in a room with me for 2 hours. I don't say that lightly. No, it's more than that. The people that I'm playing with, the people that I'm playing with at the moment, I've known them all for many, many years, and they're very good friends as well as being very, very good musicians. And so it's just that, really, a mixture. I think there was that saying that Rob Burke would always speak about it at Monash, which was if you want to play, you've got to be a good hang too. And I think the people that I'm playing music with are definitely inspiring musicians and artists, but also just good hangs.
How do you, test that out? Do you, when you're starting the band, have a few different people come in? Or was it something you knew the people beforehand
no,
and you were no, I want you into my project?
No, initially for For the band that I'm singing for at the moment, Alpaca Maraca, I was friends with all of the members beforehand, except for the drummer who, we've become great friends now, but we actually met in a really strange series of circumstances where I got a call in the middle of lockdown from his mother. And she was like, "Hi, I'm from Cairns and my son has just moved to Melbourne to study at Monash and needs a place to practice. Do you have, could you rent out your studio or something?" And she'd gotten my number from an online music teacher's website. And then from there, he and I just started chatting, and I found out that he really liked the Cat Empire, which is what I'm hoping to model this band off. And yeah, the rest is history. Now we're good buddies. So that was a bit of a, spanner in the works as to how he came into it. But shout out to Alex Cooper. What a dude. The dude from Cairns.
That's so random. Whose mum called to organise a drum kit practice space?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, tell us a bit more about Alpaca Maraca. We've had Danny Ferrugia recently on the podcast, who's now playing with Cat Empire. So I think this could be a nice circular moment of, all right, well, we've had Danny's perspective of Cat Empire, but coming in at the end, after their probably biggest success. They're still playing a lot and touring the world, but it's not the Cat Empire of number one.
Totally.
And he's not a founding member of the band. That was Will Brown on drums.
Yeah.
But he's come in now. And then you're at the other end of the spectrum of starting a band that's in that same style and Australian. And, what is it about that style of music that, I don't know, it has become the thing that resonates the most with you for creation of this project? And, where do you want to take it?
Oh, so many good questions. And the answer to those questions are very different to what they would have been, say, 12 months ago. But let me first put the caveat in that I think even though the band is modelled after the Cat Empire, we don't really sound that similar to them. I think the similarities are we like to write music that's dancey and has horns. I don't think we're anywhere near as... I don't know. The Cat Empire are just fun, they're another band actually that I've always really, really appreciated their lyricism. I think it's very, very deep. Not always, obviously they've got their silly songs, but I really have a lot of time for the poetry in those lyrics.
Hello. Comes to mind.
Yeah. Pish posh. But with respect to that style of music, I think that kind of quasi-Latin pop-esque thing that they've got going on, I really like. I've always liked playing those kind of rhythms, much more than I've liked playing straight-ahead jazz, for example. Any kind of Afro-Cuban / Brazilian / any other culturally inappropriate reference of an entire group of music that just isn't straight ahead jazz. I've always really, really gravitated towards, because I like the fact that it can make you dance, and it can't just make you dance; it can make a lot of people dance. That's what I like about that kind of music, is how easy it is to dance to, and how communal it is.
Yeah, right. Do you think there's a bit of the crossover from punk to ska, being there's similar sort of beats and tempos at times, you have all the funness of horns and some other Latin type influences on ska music, but it also has a similar thing to the punk stuff, which maybe got you, I don't know, most excited at the start.
Yeah, I think so. I think the beat in this kind of music and the beat in punk music, it still has that sense of you can have a large group of people getting together, moving their bodies. That is more inclusive than, in my opinion, than straight ahead jazz is when it comes to people sharing in an experience where you can all move. And I've always liked that. When I was way younger and we would play gigs where it was hardcore gigs and people were doing the hardcore moshing thing, there's still a version of communal movement there that I think is really, really therapeutic, dare I say. be it at the end of the spectrum where you're all just bouncing up and down, or be it at the end of the spectrum where you're, salsa dancing or whatever. I like the interplay between rhythm and movement and the energy when many, many people are doing that together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't think you get that with straight ahead jazz. You get other things with straight ahead jazz for sure, but not that, I don't think.
Yeah, interesting. So
Excluding, obviously, now that I'm thinking about it, excluding those swing big bands from the 20s, obviously that's a different kettle of fish, but you don't really see that in a dance space as much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're talking about music for making people dance.
Yeah.
Rather than, improvisation spheres to create a feeling or experience or something. But if I take you back to Alpaca Maraca,
yep,
we're at the starting phase. What's it like, starting that band and, the initial processes of like, okay, you've pulled together all these people and you've written some songs, and now you've got to try and book some gigs and make some recordings and, the initial phases of a band, even though you had this long experience of making music, it's like I'd like your you to share about like starting the process now in your, late 20s.
Yeah. I think, to be fair, it started probably in my mid-20s, but then COVID and things like that happened as well, that put things on the back burner. What is the experience like? It's great. It's really, really rewarding when things are going well. When you've got music that sounds good that everyone's contributing towards, there's no better feeling. There are always going to be difficult things associated with getting any group of people together. Schedules, one that comes to mind immediately, but it's still worth it and it's still fun. I don't know. I don't really have much more to say about it other than I don't think if the benefits of playing and composing and booking gigs with Alpaca Maraca outweighed the frustrations, I wouldn't be doing it, but I still am doing it. So that's a testament to, there's something I'm getting out of it at least.
Is that what gets you, like keeps you motivated for it, I suppose? Like the positive things you get out of the band experience? Or are you more motivated for like the potential future of the project?
I think 12 months ago it would have been the latter, but a lot's happened in the last 12 months that have really fundamentally changed my outlook on it. Now it's just a case of, hey, this is the kind of rush that I get when music is sounding good is next to no other high I've experienced, and that is enough reason for me to do it. As for like ambitions associated with it, not so much, not anymore. It's still an awesome time, but yeah, the last 12 months have been have changed my perspective on a lot of those things, and one of the things that have happened in the last 12 months has been, as I said earlier on, the loss of my father, who I mentioned was a really, really profound impact on a lot of my musical journeys, and his death has meant that a lot of things are putting themselves in different perspectives than they were 12 months ago.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Watch this space, I suppose. Who knows? I think now, though, my priorities are more about just enjoying the time that I have on planet Earth and loving the people around me. Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry for your loss. And it must be like a massive perspective shift or readjustment, I suppose. Losing your dad, because he has been such like a close connection and mentor with like these different things he said to you over the time.
Totally.
Like supporting you with your music career.
Yeah.
Do you think, are you the type that wants to like process your feelings and stuff through music making? Or, is that something sort of separate because the music that you're writing at the moment is more for like a dance band?
Yeah, great question. I don't think I'd never actively repress writing music as a way to process the emotions that I've got around my dad's death. But I just haven't needed to. I think the grieving process that I've been going through has manifested itself in other ways that I'm comfortable with, but I don't have this need to write, which kind of surprises me a little bit. Maybe it'll come out, but I don't want to sit at the piano kind of waiting. I certainly don't think that's going to lead anywhere fruitful, waiting for something about my dad to come out. I'm sure it will come out naturally when the time is right, or it won't, and that is what it is. I think at the moment, because a lot of the music in Alpaca Meraki is lyrically focused on relatively uplifting messages, I think that's enough for me to enjoy it at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What do you think you're trying to say, I guess, in your lyrics with the band? Like, if I think of, like, my favorite dance band would probably be Chic, and their lyrics are like, these are the good times.
Yeah.
Or, like, freak out. Like,
you know, I was listening to a podcast the other day where Nile Rodgers was featuring on it. It was a Louis Theroux podcast. And
oh, yeah, I've listened to that. That's great.
That's a wicked podcast. Yeah. And an episode. But I don't. It's interesting because I don't know what the subtext of the comment that you just made was, but I think listening to Nile Rodgers speak about those lyrics and what they represented to him at that time, like they were actually quite profound. Like, even though maybe listening in 2020 to a band talking about how they are family, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty cheesy. It's like, well, there was some serious things going on in his life at that time, and those messages were pretty profound. So, yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah, that was sort of leaning into what my question was going to be. Like, are you writing things that are deep and meaningful for you, but come across in a way that is, say, more like simplistic in nature, or because lyrics are so important to you, maybe they're like, they come in a more complex format, or, you know, there's more, say, like, poetry behind it than just stating it as simply as like a disco song back in the 70s?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it would be in the ear of the listener. I think I just write what feels most appropriate. Whether that's poetic or not depends on... Yeah, I think, you know, one person could listen to my lyrics and be like, wow, that's so profound. And another person could listen to it and be like, wow, that's so basic. And another one could listen to it and be like, that's so... like, what a twat. I don't know if that's a bad word. Sorry.
It's fine.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't write for any other reason than to enjoy the process, I think. I think that's true.
Yeah, that's cool. I guess I'm trying to understand, like, you know, we've had some people on that say, like, oh, they just write their emotions, and others that it's like, oh, I'm writing this, you know, creative piece, or I'm doing a creative writing course to help me with my writing. And I wonder if for you, you're just writing and it is what it is, or if there's something more, you know, deliberate about, like, I'm putting my specific, you know, grammatical analysis into this, or I'm approaching it from you know.
No, I don't think, for someone that thinks deeply about other people's lyrics, I don't tend to think that deeply about mine. When I think I'm writing, it does just come in a flow, where I feel particularly inspired by something, and then I'll go with that. But I don't sit around kind of going, oh, when is inspiration going to strike? It's like, okay, well, if inspiration hasn't struck, then I'll go and do something else.
Yeah, interesting.
And because I've got no financial incentive to pursue writing lyrics at the moment, there's no pressure associated with it. Like, I've got other things going on that I can focus on. And then when the time is right to come back and do some writing, it just feels so much more natural. And I think that speaks to, again, those bands that I used to listen to when I was so much younger. They did not strike me as people that were sitting around analysing every second word. And that's what I liked about it. They were just honest and raw, and that spoke to the human condition. And John Bellion, you know, probably does think about lyrics for a while, I would assume, but doesn't try and manipulate audience interpretation of those lyrics. That's what I like about his lyrics. He's doing it for him. I think. Waiting for your email response as well, John Bellion. FYI. Can't wait for Monday morning.
Everybody tag them in.
Cat umpire, Felix Riebel. You can throw one in there as well. Anyone, please. But yeah, I don't know. I think, as with anything, if you overthink them too much, they become more of a slave whip than they really ought to. And I don't want my relationship with writing to be like that. Life's too short.
Yeah, so interesting. Well, what do you feel about, like, you know, the more like session drumming stuff that you did? Like, you know, you would have had like some objectively cool experiences, like going to China and like Outback Northern Territory and stuff. Like, is that something that you want to be doing more of? Or is that more like I had my time as like a session drummer, but I'm more interested in doing these other like creative projects and teaching than, you know, I guess furthering the like session drummer hat? Or if that's too prescriptive, take it however you want.
Blah, blah. Again, because of the last 12 months, that there are so many answers to these questions that 12 months ago would have been far more certain from my perspective. But now I'm like, geez, I don't really know. As a function of, well, life's pretty upside down these days. But I think I am open to whatever opportunity presents itself musically at the moment, or non-musically. I've after those really, really cool experiences that I did have, I was pretty satisfied to leave those for a while. I was like, yep, cool, done the being a gun for hire thing, and that's great, but I'd like to see what it is to be the person making things happen now rather than the hired help. And, you know, one of the most inspirational people that I've ever met actually was as a result of working as a drummer for him, and that's Miles Gregory from Pop-Up Globe, and he was kind of the brains behind making that dream a reality. And it was certainly not an easy ride from my understanding, you know, from growing the idea to what it was as a pipe dream in New Zealand to making it a reality kind of across the Asia Pacific. I thought that was really, really cool, and I wanted to explore that for a while. And yeah, there's you know, I could speak for a long time about how much respect I had for him, but in particular, it was his ability to bring people together and offer artists, not just musicians, but, you know, namely actors, but also set designers and directors and managers and all of these people, giving them a grassroots opportunity to play and be paid as professional performers off his own back is something that I just think is incredible. And it's something that I really aspired to do. I think giving people the opportunity to play music or perform music or, you know, perform art, you know, acting, whatever it may be, it's not easy to do that stuff. And so anyone who's willing to throw their hat in the ring and go, oh, I'm going to try and make this work, not just for my sake, but for the sake of other people, it's like, that's bloody cool. Like that speaks so much to their capacity in my perspective, to create, sure, but also allow other people the opportunity to create. I think it's just so cool. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind describing what Pop-Up Globe is, just for anyone who doesn't know?
Yes, sure. So Pop-Up Globe was a company that was founded on the idea to make Shakespeare relatable to the modern audience, and usually up until that stage, most people had not seen Shakespeare in the way that Shakespeare himself had intended, which was, in this Globe theatre. Or if they had, they needed to travel to the other side of the world and visit the Globe in England. And I think Miles Gregory was speaking to his, if I remember the story correctly, he was speaking to his kids and he was showing them a book on Shakespeare, and the Globe popped up. And I think his daughter said, I'd like to go there, but it's... And he sort of said, oh, well, honey, that's the other side of the world. And I think that idea percolated in his mind for a little while. I think he had quite a few, I don't know how many years, but a number of years experience in the artistic world between New Zealand and England. And he sort of started thinking, well, why is it that people need to travel all the way to England to experience this high level of art in the way that its original creator intended? Like, what is stopping me from making that a reality on the other side of the world? And again, obviously you can still, there are many, many Shakespearean companies and performances that go on in Australia and in New Zealand, but none of them in an architectural environment identical to the Globe. And so that is what was unique about Pop-Up Globe, is that he made this, what would you call it? Environment, I guess. This environment that was just a big, in the name, it was a pop-up Globe theatre. And it started in New Zealand. And I think the thing that I find most impressive about it is that he didn't get anyone's help financially for that. It's a huge risk. Any kind of artistic venture in and of itself is a risk. But this guy, he had a family and kids, and he remortgaged his house to finance the project. And that's just so cool, and he did it to get work and to bring art to the masses. And that is single-handedly one of the top most inspirational things that I've ever heard in my life. And when I first had the rehearsals at Pop-Up Globe, I remember we, as the company, was standing in a circle and Miles came in and he just got everyone to talk, as you often do before theatrical performances, and he just said, hey, regardless of any of the struggles that we're facing at the moment, because there are quite a few logistic things that were going on that weren't going according to plan, and he said that regardless of what's happening, I would like everyone to remember that this company was built on the ideas of hope, unity and joy, and I want everyone to remember those things when they go into their work over the next couple of months. And I was just like, who is this guy? He's not only given jobs, well-paid jobs, might I add, to an enormous amount of artists, but the humility with which he speaks about what it is in the job that they are all doing is incredible. And that is something that, at least on a much less impressive order of magnitude, I've tried to remember when doing stuff with Alpaca America, let's say. It's it's one thing to play music and it's another thing to give people the opportunity to play music. And it's another thing to give people the opportunity to play music and then know what you stand for when you're doing that. That's just cool. It's real cool.
Yeah, and very special to be part of that. I don't know, it seems like to have been so... Like, it would be encouraging and inspiring to anyone, but you've really sort of taken that on to try and make that the experience of people that work with you. That, I don't know, you seem to really embody those same qualities and bring that same level of, passion and excitement and encouraging and uplifting and giving opportunities to others in your own projects.
I'd like to think that, but again, I suppose you should have the other musicians in here and get their perspective, because it's easy to say from the safety of this lounge room. But yeah, I'd like to think that's what it's what I aspire to do at the very least.
Well, we've been playing this game on the podcast where each guest asks a question of the next guest.
Okay.
So I've got a question for you from the previous guest, Nico from Pughouse Studios.
I've worked with Nico.
Yeah, an absolute legend.
Yeah, wow, what a dude. How is he?
He's doing great.
Cool.
All right, this is his question for you.
Okay.
How do you think about sound other than the sound you make with your own instrument? Like, do you take textures and take a compositional approach by sounds that are not inherent necessarily in your own instrument? How do you deal with it? How can you contribute to the sound of the moment?
Oh man, that's a great question, because I think it really shines a light on one of my biggest deficiencies as a musician, is that unlike some of my friends who are very, very invested in getting the perfect sound for particular things, I think I've certainly improved in that capacity, but I've always had this attitude of, she'll be right. Like, it doesn't need to be perfect. The energy is what is important, and that's where I've focused on, and sound and textures and delicacy around those things is not a strength of mine. And I work with people who are far better at that. So I think the way that I think about sound is to frequently rub shoulders with people who think about sound much better than I do. And a great example of that is a man by the name of Dylan Kanua, who is the band leader of Dylan and the Observable Universe. And I love working with him because he is so particular about sounds. And I have to really be like, goodness gracious me, like, how important is this? But, sometimes those things are make or break. And it's not something that comes naturally to me. I'm not quite highbrow enough to think super, super deeply about the importance of particular sounds, while at the same time recognizing that some of my favorite artists do that very, very well. So it's a room for improvement. That's how I think about sound. It's a room for improvement in my set of tools.
Well, what question would you like to ask our next guest?
Do I know who the guest is?
No.
Okay.
Musician.
I do know who the guest is, actually, because you told me. You told me before we started this podcast. I do know who the guest is. I just don't know who. I don't know.
There's another guest who could be coming in, so that guest is not necessarily going to get your question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe you.
The person I was recording with this morning might be coming past.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
My question for them. What's a good question? What do they think about the comment that I heard a couple of times through uni, which was, if you can do anything other than music, then do it and don't do music? What do they think about that comment?
That's interesting. I don't remember hearing that.
I heard it a couple of times.
Maybe I just tuned out to things like that whilst I was there.
Maybe.
Because I chose not to do anything other than music whilst I was at uni.
Yeah.
Was that something that was said by staff or
other
students?
Yeah. And I won't name drop. But yeah, that was I think the motive for saying something like that was that, the music industry can be a rough beast, and so if there's anything else that you show proclivity towards, then dive all in that, because there's a lot of tragedy associated with pursuing music. I think that's the gist of what they were getting at.
Yeah, sure.
And I had real trouble with that at the time, because I loved music, but I was involved in quite a lot of other things that I was really enjoying as well. So nonetheless, still here, still playing music. So.
Well, which I think is great. Well, we would like to wrap up with 5 quick answer questions.
Go.
What is... oh, sorry, I'm just getting my notes sorted. What is your favourite venue to play in Melbourne?
I'm really, really warming to open studio these days because it's so small and cozy.
What's your dream venue to play at?
I don't have one. I'm not going to answer that question.
What is your coffee order?
An almond latte, large.
What is your favourite place to get food after a gig in Melbourne?
Ooh. I don't like eating after gigs, usually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you always been like that?
I think so.
What is one piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self?
One piece of advice.
And we can add Els Kerr's asterisks, which is that your younger self would have actually listened to.
How is Alka? Has he been? I need to. Hey, Al. I can't call you that. Hey, Alistair. One piece of advice. When you go for long runs, make sure you stretch your Achilles afterwards. That's my piece of advice to my younger self.
Would your younger self have listened?
Potentially.
It's
not musical, but it's important. It goes for anyone. Piece of
Yeah.
advice. Make sure you stretch
Thanks.
after long runs.
How do you stretch an Achilles? Because isn't that like on your ankle?
Well, it's kind of like your calf muscle. So stretch your calf muscle. Calves are important,
Yeah, cool.
though often neglected.
Well, Cullen, if anyone wants to check out some of your music,
Yeah.
come to see an alpaca show or book you to play drums or teach a lesson or something like that, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Probably my email, which is cthodrums@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
Cto drums. Ctho.
Yeah, I'll add that in the podcast liner notes on our website so people can just copy and paste it straight into their email browser.
Yeah. Especially you, Anderson Paak and
John Bellion.
And
representatives from the Cat Empire.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It
Thank you
feels
so much.
outrageous to say, but I hope they all get in contact with you.
Oh, me too. That would be such a hoot.
Yeah.
Imagine if I got to chat to John Bellion.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, no, and thanks for being so generous and coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's made me feel far more important than I actually am. So thanks for this initiative. Like on the notion of getting people in to play music. Thanks for getting people in to feel self-important for an hour.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing your story. I think you are important and you're making music in Melbourne, and it's just all about, having a space to get to know different people and what they do. And yeah, you and I both went to the same university and got the same degree, but we're doing very different things, and we had different experiences to get there, and we remember different things at the time. So even if we just interviewed, jazz graduate university drummers of Monash, it would still be an extremely diverse range of perspectives. So
Totally.
Thanks for adding your voice to the mix. Thanks for joining us on Our Drummers Musicians. I hope you enjoyed getting to know another Melbourne muso like I did. Help us grow by leaving a review, share the podcast with friends and family, and subscribe on our website for extra info. Got a guest you'd love to hear on the show? Please let us know at ourdrummersmusicians.com. See you next time.